Hi, good evening, everyone. It's the DEeP table. We're all welcome, and it's the final episode of this series, so I'm excited when I'm like, oh, somebody say, oh. But it's the final episode. But, we've kept the best for the last. Our theme today is There's No Racism in Ireland. So some of you have heard it before. You've maybe used it yourself, or, you've heard it, pushed back at you. And, people say that in different ways, sometimes defensively. So the question we're asking is, the idea that there's no racism in Ireland, is racism an import? Is it something that is imported into Ireland? Or do we say that there's no racism because it's just part of society and, we kind of don't talk about it, we deny it and we keep it buried? So that's what we're going to look at. And we have four wonderful, brave people tonight with us who are going to be helping me to look at this topic. We're back to the DEeP table, and I have Jennifer Foster, a disability and migrant rights advocate, supporter of community-driven leadership and inclusion. We also have with me Owen Ward. Owen Ward, again, I've known Owen. Owen is an EDI program manager for race equality at University of Galway, and a member of the National Anti-Racism Committee, and he did some work with them. And then we have with me as well Ruben Hambaka-Chere. He's a community development and practitioner, international trainer, and long-standing advocate for migrant rights and social justice. So thank you so much for being here, this evening, and you're welcome. So it's a brave conversation we're having tonight, isn't it? So this brave conversation, we're asking the question, there is no racism in Ireland. There is no racism in Ireland. When you hear that, what do you think? Anybody can go. Anybody can start.
I'll go first.
Okay.
I think it's when I saw the topic, I was like, yeah, this is something that is thrown out a lot. And I always ask the question myself, why do people say this? When I hear the question being asked, and the one thing that I realized is that people actually, they're afraid. And there's one thing that I realized, that people actually know that when they recognize that racism exists, it's also a recognition that inequalities exist, and that there's some people that benefit from inequalities, and they do so unintentionally. So they have to deal with that fact, that once they've realized that they are benefiting from racism, so it's easy to have that defensive statement to say there's no racism in Ireland, because the moment you recognize that racism exists, then you're asking yourself, what am I benefiting from by saying this? So there is a benefit for those who actually say it. So they're benefiting because they don't want to recognize that inequalities exist in Ireland.
Okay, so there are some people that benefit from racism, and there's an academic argument that says that, and I think maybe if we look at it that, if people were not benefiting from it, oh, come on, it would have stopped by now, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It would have ended by now. There'll be no pushback. There'll be no, anyone else, there's no reason. What does it feel like, personally, professionally, emotionally, when you hear somebody say, there's no racism in Ireland? Because I get that a lot.
So for me, I think in relation to this, when I saw this question, I was really like, really? That was my first thought, to be honest. And I said, listen, those of us with lived experience, I'm an Irish traveller myself, I have lived experience of this all my life, and I believe that I will die with that daily experience as well. It'll never leave. But I think looking at that, we have enough evidence base and we've all the research in the world to indicate that it does exist. It's alive and well in Ireland. It's not a new thing. I think in one way it was nearly perfected on the traveller community. And now it's been enhanced as it's progressing on forward. And not just the traveller community. We did have pockets of diversity in previous decades, but it has been enhanced in the last 2 or 3 decades. So it does exist. But another element to this as well is around ask this question to any international student who comes here, and lives here for 2 or 3 months. Ask them that question; they will tell you. you know, the experience that they are having. They're facing that on a daily basis. And so they're coming here to our higher education institutions. They're engaging in whatever academic area they're here. They're here to better themselves. But we do know, like ICOS did a report there 2 or 3 years ago, the International Students Committee in Ireland, Council of Ireland, and 63% of international students who participated in that research indicated that they are experiencing racism in all different forms of it. You know, online, physical, verbal, so on and so forth. But one thing that really, really strong was that the underreporting, and we know that this is happening, and that goes back to trust. So if you're underreporting it, it goes back to kind of supporting the status quo that does exist. So my answer to this question is it's alive and well.
I think one of the data that came out was, 9 out of 10 people do not report.
Yes.
9 out of 10. So I was now saying, so the data that came out, that this is the number, I said, then multiply that by 9. Just multiply by 9, because if we're saying that 9 out of 10 doesn't report, and we're saying it's increasing, and this is the numbers you have, so that means whatever number you think you see, multiply it by 9. And that begins to give us, an idea. What do you think? There's no racism in Ireland.
Well,
Or do you say that yourself?
no, absolutely not. I think there's many inequalities in Ireland, racism being top of the list. Also, anti-traveller sentiment. I'm a very big supporter of the SDG, Sustainable Development Goal Forum. And we gather there a lot of the different intersections, and we find that prejudice, whether it be disability, racism, inequality, anti-traveller sentiment, is certainly alive and well in Ireland. And it's how we combat that is why I'm here tonight.
Thank you so much. Dara, I might come to you. Why do you think it exists? What purpose is it serving? Politically, in communities, why do you think this, there's no racism sentiment? Why do you think it exists?
I mean, particularly now at the moment when you're looking at the rise of, right after the presidential election, Simon Harris came out and he was talking about, I think in response to the spoil your vote trend, where a lot of people spoiled their votes, a lot of those people would have probably voted for a right-wing anti-immigrant candidate had they run in the race. And then you have someone who lost the race badly come out and talk about, our immigration numbers are just too high, it's putting pressure on the system. No mention of the system that they've been running for so long, that the housing crisis has been a result of government policies that have been going on years and years and years. Same with the healthcare crisis. Same with traffic, actually. I've seen someone giving out about population increases caused all our traffic problems, whereas actually the government has known the population is rising for so long. So it forms a particular function when you have a lot of because you're seeing, I think, the rise of the far right of anti-immigrant politics in a lot of countries across Europe, in America as well, because a lot of the parties that have been in charge for a long time have put themselves in between a rock and a hard place, where on one end, they've caused these crises for the sake of profit. Let's be honest, that's what's happening in the housing market. It's what's happening with healthcare. And they have a choice between switching things around, doing what I'm a socialist, what I'd be arguing for, which is nationalising these industries, running them not for profit. You could tackle the housing crisis that way, but they have a choice, choosing that or finding an easy scapegoat to blame for these issues. And I think when it comes to, in Ireland now, there's 10 times more empty properties than there are homeless people. Even back in the 20s, the 50s, the 60s, when we had far less money in this country, we built housing directly through the corporation, the Dublin Corporation. So there's a lack of political will there to challenge kind of those big questions in terms of who's making money out of housing, how do we solve the healthcare system. And when that happens, an easy scapegoat is the person who just came in, So when you have politicians, high-ranking ones, you were talking about immigration being too high, and then trying to make it out that there's hundreds of thousands of people here illegally. That term, even illegal migrant, is something I hadn't heard in Ireland until like the last couple of years. It seems to have come from the American kind of right and come in here to try and dehumanize people. And it's funny, when the term is used, unvetted, illegal, they're not used about, no one's checking paperwork before they use the term, they're using it against everybody. So I think it like, sorry, I'm going on a bit, but I think that's where, for the powerful, often it's an easy scapegoat, finding a target, someone to blame. And then at the bottom, I guess, for the regular person, people who kind of fall for this rhetoric, it's also, you can understand that it's a thing of when it looks like there's scarcity, when there looks like there isn't enough for everybody to go around. And if you don't have the confidence, because I think it's a demoralization problem. When people see everything that's going on, they're seeing families and friends becoming homeless. And when you don't see or don't have any confidence in things to change, when there's scarcity or there appears to be scarcity, it's easier to kick down on the ladder the person lower than you, the person who just came in, the person who's an asylum seeker. But I don't know if that answered the question.
No, it did answer the question, and you touched on quite a lot of things, there as well, I mean, we've seen all the new policies that are going out, about migration, and all of those things, and one of the things you touched about, and I write about it as well, is, that when we categorize people, so categories are actually used to dehumanize people. So when I've created a category, then you're no longer a person, you're a title, you're a thing, so we can do anything to you. We don't see the person. Because if we saw the person behind this group called migrants, unvetted males, or, dangerous males, or, asylum seekers, international protect, whatever name, global south, or, if we saw them as people, then the policies, the things we are putting, in place, we will stop. But when we put a category in place, then it gives us the freedom, to treat it, you say, oh, that's a chair, so you can do stuff to it because it's a chair.
Exactly.
Because so you've been able to label it and put it. That's how powerful categories are.
Can I interject
Yes.
here? Dara has really touched on my passionate interest. So in preparation for tonight, I spoke to one of my best friends in the UK whose family is from Bangladesh. And we have often chewed the cud when I go to London. I go to London at least once a month. I enjoy the whole vibrancy of London. It's my second home. And he reminded me, he had sent it to me before, it was an Enoch Pell, who was a British conservative politician back in the 60s and 70s. And he was on a show called the Dick Cavett Show. Now, look at it, right? And it was a debate between Jonathan Miller and himself. And it really touched on exactly what you were talking about there, Dara. It's politicians have a responsibility to be very wary of their rhetoric. So one of the things that Jonathan Miller said is politicians who excite fear or horror. Okay, so he used quite significant language and encourage ethnic friction. Okay, instead of encouraging social cooperation and interaction and cohesion. And when we've got politicians today that do that, and we've got the younger folk looking at TikTok and the like, and the lower socioeconomic communities who are fighting for everything they can get, including the migrants are in there as well, and the people of colour and black and African and whatever you like to identify yourself as, are in that. This is just dynamite because you got the politicians saying these things, and it really, sorry Dara, but you touched on it and I couldn't let it go.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, if there's a housing crisis,
Yes.
it affects everybody.
Absolutely.
I mean, they're not going. Actually, it affects the migrants more because when you pick up the phone, it's gone.
Oh.
When you call, they say it's gone. Once they hear your accent, it's gone. And if you mistakenly show up there because you sound Irish, when you get there, they see your face, it's gone.
Yeah.
And so so they are impacted by that as well. And you
Yeah, I
mentioned
think-
just even the work of our politicians. Again, we come to the part. I was just looking at it. I was looking at the new laws, the new policies that are going in place. I'm like, wow. we are really moving from, inclusion to,
Yeah.
it's no more about protection anymore now. It's about, people have to actually struggle to belong. Enforcement. So we've gone from protection to enforcement.
Absolutely.
And that's,
I
that's
agree
what-
with you,
so
Emma.
that issue of belonging is not going to be an issue anymore. Nobody's going to be talking about belonging.
No.
Because there's an accent. But, Owen, I might come to you, and ask, is racism an import, So is it American, they're like, oh, Ebun, she's reading critical race theory, that is it. So is it an import, or do we have our older forms of racialization in Ireland?
Yeah, so I think I just touched on that a few minutes ago. It's definitely not an import. I believe that it's always been ingrained in Irish society. I believe that I know, and there's an evidence base to back this up, that with the traveller community, the oppression, the racism that they've experienced over the years,
Correct.
and I mean like hundreds of years.
Absolutely.
You can nearly go back.
Yeah.
In one way, that has nearly perfected the model. And then we would have had sprinkles kind of other diversity coming in. So by the time, it continues to exist, and it's very, very strong and very, very socially acceptable. But with the increase in diversity since the year 2000 or so on, the last 2 or 3 decades, it has just enhanced because the model was there. So for me, I firmly believe that.
I know, and with the traveller community, and I don't want to trigger any, feelings from yourself that you might find difficult. But I worked in hospitality for a number of years, and it's horrendous. The discrimination, and it's we've got the Equality Acts now, and it's up to each and every one of us to use them and to try and highlight the inequalities for all of us. Disabled, black people.
So I think for them
brown
to
people.
work, I think what's very important is to have an honest conversation,
Yeah,
honest
exactly.
trust, and have trust in public institutions, but also public representatives. Because when you speak of the traveller community or any oppressed community, the power does not rest there.
No.
No,
Power
absolutely not.
rests with the politicians.
The power rests
with
with
the
the middle class
institutions.
people that run all these establishments.
So, for me, I would kind of see that when we speak of equality legislation, I've seen that been weakened. I've concerns that it would be even weakened more, and I find certain cases going forward, it's just not having the outcome. So it has never. I believe that the traveller community has benefited somewhat in relation to the equality legislation, but not to where it would say, oh, that's dealt with there now, because we have travellers at the moment who are living in appalling living conditions.
Absolutely.
Very bad educational outcomes, health outcomes, the suicide rates in the community is unreal, mental health. And I suppose when I look at, and I am a traveller myself, so when we look at the community, and sometimes I look at other Indigenous communities or from other parts of the world, and that you can actually see it nearly replicates, it's replicating itself.
Throughout the world.
And power is at the centre of that. Power is there, and where that balance of power lies, it definitely does not lie in the hands of oppressed groups.
Not at all. Ruben, why do you think Ireland struggles to name racism directly?
Racism, really, I think it's a matter of changing the language. Because when we start talking about racism, people get a discomfort and they become very defensive. But when you identify that racism is not about individuals, it's about systems, and it's the systems of oppression. And when we shift to that language where we are looking at what you said there, and looking at people as individuals, and actually having a language that describes people in policy that we can understand. Because like when you talk about legislation and we have policies that are out there, they're general. But when you come down, even when it comes to travelers or migrants, when you come down and we change our language, like right now, there's one thing that I have an issue with. We talk of people that are coming to seek asylum, refugees and all that. But if you would just flip that and we look at everyone that is coming into Ireland as an international person, someone that is coming into Ireland as a social capital rather than someone who's coming to be a burden. So what is happening is that everyone who is coming into Ireland is a burden to the state, but people are coming to add value. That's not captured in the conversation now. So I think we should shift the language. It's very important that we start naming things in a different way if we want to see a change. So racism itself, the way it has been framed around individuals, and people become afraid they think we are blaming all white people.
Yeah.
But we should step away from that and name the systems of oppression that exist, and then we can have a better discourse on the issue.
Yeah, I think it is a major problem, because if we cannot, and that's why for me this is really important that we have that space, where we can actually name it and talk about it and demystify it, and make it just normal to talk about. Because if we cannot talk about it, we cannot fix it. Because if people are still, uncomfortable, like, I'm like, okay, it's last week we were talking about who bears the burden. If we can't talk about it, if I have to make it palatable and make it nice, then then it's still you who is the victim, who is still having to go through that whole process.
I think acknowledging racism in Irish society actually goes against Irish identity.
Yeah.
And if I'm being really honest, and particularly the post-colonial Irish identity that does exist. So the Irish identity would have been built around being oppressed and being colonized, and we were passive in that.
We're embarrassed.
yeah,
We're
but
embarrassed
that is-
people are racist.
Yeah, but the thing about
It is.
that identity is that we weren't passive. We were very active in that model, in that. So I think to acknowledge racism actually goes against that, and it jars the whole Irish identity piece, and that's very uncomfortable for the Irish society. That's what I.
We did a session that was called "I'm Not a Racist Bot," and yeah, I think. Well, my experience in Ireland is I think people are more offended just at the thought that of being thought of as racist than anything. Do you know? So it's really interesting, very interesting. But Dara, what types of racism remain invisible or unspoken in Ireland?
Well, there's this phrase I really hate about anti-traveller racism being the acceptable form of racism, which it's there to people say it to try and put it as, oh yeah, people do it anyway, but it's a horrible way to frame it sometimes, because it shouldn't be acceptable. But that's one thing where when I got onto the council, it was one of the first questions I asked about how much of the housing budget that's specifically there for the traveller community gets spent each year, because it's a problem across a lot of county councils where that budget is specifically put there to be used. It doesn't get used because often if the council goes to plan something, local county councillors will look for votes explicitly from by turning up racism, by going to people in the local area saying this is going to go on, I'll object to it, everybody sign a form, that sort of thing. It's something that's kind of that ends up not getting called out, and that's the general. I think it's across the board, whatever form of racism it is against what race or identity, that there's I think the tendency to kind of let things slide and accept them and not call it out and pretend like it's you don't maybe have a responsibility to do anything about it. Just sorry, I thought some of the things people were saying was very interesting. So just to come back on this kind of post-colonial identity, I think a lot of people kind of, again, it's about Ireland being colonised, Ireland being partitioned, a lot of the history around kind of British intervention here, that people like them to see themselves as they see their you go to England and there's no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. So people want to reject the idea that racism is here. And I think looking at that history, it's something to be proud of as long as we're continuing it on. If we're going to say, yes, we faced those conditions and now we're going to show solidarity to everybody who's facing them now, I think that's an effective use of our history and identity. And I think that's an argument that you can win with a lot of people. How many Irish people immigrated to... I think this is kind of interesting, actually, because I've mentioned quite a few times to people about the sheer number of Irish people who have emigrated abroad, who who built a lot of Britain, who built a lot of America, the exact same lies were told about Irish people there. But I've heard back as a response to that, when the Irish went over, they worked and they didn't scam the system, which actually, if you see what people were saying about Irish people then, that was all they were saying about them, that they're scamming the system, that all they do is drink. It's the same lies and the same sort of process of othering, and again, it's a means to find a scapegoat for poverty that exists, that you can say, well, it's the Irish who are causing all the problems, and you were talking a bit about those labels. The unvetted man has become a label that you can use. Even migrant, to a certain extent, you use that, all these migrant men. And it's been reflective, I think, in how some politicians talk about it now, that they're able to go, okay, I can use that label. It's ambiguous enough that it's a dog whistle, basically. The people I want to hear the racism will hear the racism, and the people who I don't want to hear it can't prove anything. It's kind of used like that. So you get to say, we want to cut down on immigration numbers. None of them they don't say who, they're just putting out a vibe that there's some people who are here who shouldn't be here. But when that makes its way down, from the politicians up here who are dog whistling, it makes its way down then to these kind of right-wing influencers online who are making these videos, which then go out to young people who are seeing them, and then they have a justification to go and attack people like they did in Tala, that Indian man. But just on the question of where power lies, it's kind of interesting, because in the day-to-day, when you look at how the state functions, when you look at state kind of racism, against the traveller community, direct provision, what they're bringing in now, immigration policies that won't solve any issues, but will give them, at least give them votes. I can go to the media and tell them I'm cracking it. One of them was €300,000 to pay for a chartered flight to send people back to Nigeria. One of the men they sent back used to live in Clondalkin. He volunteers in the local tidy towns, the Global Garden. He works in Ireland. And the annoying thing is, he was deported, he had to leave, and his family were given leave to stay because they would have faced persecution. Back in Nigeria. So you've deported him because you wanted to bump up the numbers of people and say, but you've split up a family now because anyway, it's the nonsense system. But sorry, I'm getting off my point here. But on the day-to-day of the way the state functions, of who gets listened to and who doesn't, it appears, I think, often it's not the oppressed people who have any power. But I think when you look at the system as a whole, when you look at, for instance, sorry, I know it's a bit different, but the Stonewall riots, where the LGBT community was such a tiny minority, and said, we're not going to take this anymore, actually. We're going to keep fighting back, to the point where they pushed the window, they pushed I'm looking for an analogy here, so far to by protest and look, that requires allies as well. But I think where power lies in society, who has it, can be a kind of trick, because in the day-to-day it feels like we don't have it. It's in the hands of people and politicians. And then on rare occasions, it becomes very clear that the politicians have very little power, because what they're doing is getting a thermometer and checking which way the wind is blowing and what the temperature is like. And if enough pressure is put on them, they'll cave. And obviously that works sorry, I'm going on a bit.
And we see a lot of that happening now. I think for me, it's just, I'm just trying to get my head around, the new policies. And you mentioned something about families being split, So when we're saying that, that, it's going to take, you have to actually have money. You actually have to prove that you can take care of the family before you can bring your family here. So we're saying that, yes, we can take your labor, you can come here and work, but, you can't bring your family. I'm like, the reason they are here is so they can earn, and be able to have, so if they have to have, a certain level of income, before. Anyway, so all of that is, but Jennifer, I might ask, when race and disability, when those things intersect, how do you think that, people from ethnic minorities or how do you think, racism, impacts on them?
Right. So, in readiness for this question, I spoke to a wonderful lady in the pavilions who was, identified herself as African and disabled. So I wanted to, obviously speak. I just spoke to one, so obviously it was only one person, but she seemed to feel that the system has barriers in general for every disabled person. from her own experience, she felt that she hadn't really been discriminated against. However, she did say, I asked if she had received any racial discrimination, and she said she had many times. So I think she was just being polite to me. So when I was digging a bit deeper into this, so barriers are stacked on top of each other. So first of all, you're disabled, okay? Or a person of a disability, whichever way you'd like to look at it. And you face obstacles for that. Then you are either a migrant or from an ethnic minority. So you face straight away access to possibly language services. Studies have shown how countries with minorities don't have access to early diagnosis. They're more likely to be misdiagnosed, which is really, is awful. They're less likely to be referred to specialist services. There's also then the economic inequality plays a role. Also, facilities may exclude culturally diverse people. Also, people being denied services or spoken to disrespectfully, and we've seen that time and time again. I see it all the time. It's not something that we need any figures for. And a lot of the time, migrants are assumed to be less in need. And then when racism and ableism intersect, they create inequality in themselves. So it is very difficult for migrants, Black people, African people to access disability services within the language they speak as well, which is dreadful. I mean, and it does cause a lot of difficulties. And from an autism point of view, we work with a lot of intersections now, and we are looking at doing all our resources in different languages.
Okay.
Which will be helpful, and we're going out to different counties and different intersections. So, but it is something we have to work a lot harder on, and the government have to work a lot harder on.
Oh, I was going to ask you a question. I was going to say, then I started thinking about it. I said, is that so? So I'm going to ask you the question that is in my head. So I was going to ask you a question that, that anti-traveler racism is denied most, Then I was wondering, is that so? Is there a normal acceptance in Ireland about anti-traveler? Okay, so if I start talking about racism, I would get pushbacks. I mean, I made it to Australia. The last week's DEeP table actually made it to Australia and a few podcasts. So I was the topic of the podcast, last week's episode. But, so I know that if I start talking about racism, I get a lot of pushback. Oh, yeah. There's no racism. But is there a pushback about anti-traveler racism? Do people accept that there is anti-traveler racism, or is there a pushback?
Yeah. So when we look at racism and the criteria to reach racism, people will agree, not publicly, not publicly, that this is happening. This is happening. But when we say this is happening to a traveller, this is not racism. This is just socially acceptable. And it's like you're speaking about one of the most historical marginalised communities in Ireland. And I think a good example of that, out from all the poor outcomes that we measure around education, housing, health, and so on and so forth, another major pushback is when the fight the travellers had to do to just gain ethnicity status. That was a proof there of that it does exist. So for me, I believe that, and I believe it's very acceptable. I believe that people are saying things, microaggressions, and using certain terminology that is totally racist towards travellers, but they wouldn't say it about another group, maybe, Right. So I have this, is there a liberal view? Is there all different kind of views of...
So are we saying then that there is an acceptance? Do people accept that there is anti-traveller racism, or it is just acceptable to perform anti-traveller racism?
I think there's an issue around using the word anti-traveller racism,
Okay.
but it is live and well. You know, we do. It is live and well.
Okay, because I was asking in my head and I was, yes, I just wanted to tease that. Ruben, I might come to you like, so your years of community and refugee work, how has racism denied or minimized or reframed? How has it been reframed or been denied?
Well, it has been denied because when you look at it, like I said, it's systems. If you look at the system of direct provision, for example, that's institutionalization, and that's state-led sanction on poverty for the people that are living in those conditions. So it has been like that for a while. Very little has been done to make for changes for the people that are in that setting. So for the people themselves, I have the lived experience. I went through the system, so I experienced that firsthand. It's not something that I read about in a textbook. So when I was in that situation, I could see that I was well able to do things. And at the time that I was on the system, I didn't have the right to work. So things have changed a bit in there. So there are policies that have been progressive, but some of them are being undone now. Okay. And we see with the change in policy that a lot of things that were beginning to look good or to work for the people that are in the international protection system, those things are being changed, and it's more of pushing back on people that are coming in, so that people are not excited about coming to Ireland. It's like refugees pick up the globe and then spin it and say, I want to go to Ireland, and make that choice as if they flick a coin and say, I'm going to Ireland, heads or tails. Actually, people don't make that decision. People don't have those choices. They end up in Ireland. And if we look at what is happening in other countries, how we process people coming to seek protection here and how we treat them is totally different. We're not looking at the value that people are bringing, but we're looking at, it has actually created a lot of division on how do we bring people in. So when I arrived in Ireland, I could have been looked at as someone who is dependent on the state, and I want something from the state. But today, my position in Ireland, after 20 years, I'm giving back to the state. So that was not envisaged when I arrived. But the racist system was there, and it was already underlining me. I was under the bar. I was not qualified for, but now I'm qualified for. I'm still under the bar in certain areas, but I'm giving back to society. So there's no progression for the person when they're still in the system. Yeah. But when you are out of the system, you might progress because of your own ability, or maybe systems are supporting you. But for those that are done by the system, those that are affected by the system, because it actually causes depression. So a lot of people that have gone through the process, some of them have been depressed. They are not who they were when they arrived. No. So they arrived here very confident, vibrant. They wanted to give back something to society, and then the system actually affected them. Some people never recover. Yeah. Some people are actually in mental health institutes right now because of what the system did. If you look at the number of people from who are seeking international protection, who are actually giving back in voluntary work, like there are a lot of, because they are just like, I can't be waking up every day. The society paints it as if they are so happy to be waking up every day. But for them, that's the worst thing. I met a young lady 2 days ago, and she was just so gutted. Like, we want to work, that she's been here 8 months, and they're not allowed to work. I was like, no, but you're here 8 months, you should be able to work. And she was like, no, because she came and she was of Nigerian descent, and then they did her interview really quickly, and they denied her. And once you've been denied, then you don't get the right to work anymore. Do you understand? So she's in the system 8 months not working. I said, but every day somebody is here. We're looking for people to do some work. We're looking for, I don't get it, we're looking for people to work. It's a no-brainer. We spent 1.7 million to deport 30 or so. I don't know the numbers, but it was a small number. We said 1.7, but it was done publicly. It just shows you that it's to appease, certain people. I might ask you again, just between the EU and Ireland, are there any changes that you're seeing when it comes to this, any patterns, you see, Europe versus, Ireland? There are changes in other countries now, like I was saying, in the terms of language. There are countries that have actually gone very far in terms of integrating people that have come in, like looking at them as social capital, and they are creating conditions for people to thrive. And that's not happening in Ireland. So if people are coming here and the first thing that they face is all the negative stuff that they face, they are very discouraged. Right from the onset, they think Did I make the right choice to end up here? Should I be leaving the country? So there's evidence that people that have come here on work permits, a lot of them don't spend 5 years here. But companies are investing on those people to give them the work permits to arrive here, but they don't end up staying here. Companies are investing in those people. And so there's a brain drain from the people that are arriving. What other European countries are doing, they're making it attractive. Yeah. They're actually taking migrants from Ireland. There are countries that they actually come here and recruit. So when the incident happened in Tala, when the young Indian man was attacked, there were some recruitment companies that came from England to target nurses and doctors in Ireland. So there are people who are looking at the opportunities of our own failures, and they're coming in to take the people that are coming. So they value the people. Yeah. So the language that we use about people that are coming in, and I think when we shift the language that we use when we are describing people that are coming to Ireland and begin to look at them as humans that are coming to add value to the country, we'll begin to treat people differently. So that is being done well in other countries. I can list the ones that I know at least. I know Italy, they have their own problems, but in terms of the language that they use to describe people that are coming in to seek protection is different. In Belgium as well, they've actually created centers of diversity and for international people. And they're creating this, and they're working with local governments to build these structures and build communities together. And they are making investments because they're investing today for a better tomorrow. And I think we were doing a bit of that, but we are going back now because of the performative politics that we see. So we need to go back to just the grassroots community work where we look from who is leading in the conversation. It should be from the bottom to the top, not the top leading on this conversation, because this conversation should be held at community level, because the community is the one that is affected. Absolutely. So we need to have those conversations. Some of them are going to give us discomfort, but if we don't have them, it's going to be generational. And
don't tell me about discomfort.
And we know that racism is generational. But if we don't have this conversation, my kids are going to be sitting in this place, God forbid, 20 years, having this conversation. So I'm here today to have this conversation so that my kids do not have to sit here and defend who they are. And because they were born here, they're Irish. They should not be looked at any way different because they've come from somewhere else.
You know, when you say that, I remember, the first deep table talk we had, Martin Collins was here, and Martin has been doing the work 40 years now.
Yes.
He's been doing this anti-traveler, he's been doing the work. So he was like, I don't really care, so he's been doing this work over 40 years. You know how discouraging it is? That you've been fighting the same thing 40 years. And I mean, it has not, it's only just shifted and this is just 2 years now, when Nitris is 2-3 years, it's only just shifted a little. It is sad, and we have Jude. I always like to display Jude Hughes, is our youngest, mixed race man, He was born in Ireland. Jude is over 80 years old, and he done so much anti-racist work many years ago. And I said something, I said, Jude, the thing is, because they did not get it right with you guys, when we came in, they didn't get it right with us as well. Because if they got it right with Jude when he was born here, when he was growing, the likes of Emma Dabiri, and all the, Rosemary, all the different people, who were mixed race, who were born here, feel, if they got it right with them, then you would have got it right with us.
But Ebun, there's a very important point here as well. So back in 2022, I was speaking to Ruben about this. So there was a bigger influx of international protection applicants, and at the time, they thought it was the government thought it was an excellent idea to displace single parents in a hotel from Ballymun. So basically, this was the start of everything. So these guys were displaced. The international protection applicants were bussed in during the night. And this is where it all spanned from, all the discourse. At that stage, it was only the community of Ballymun and the East Wall that were involved. It was handled so badly by the government. They basically got a minister down to Ballymun to say how racist the community were. There was no community involvement. I got in touch, Dara, with one of the local councillors. I said, please get Ballymun Kickums down to these guys. Get them down, get them chatting, say, listen, lads, we'll sort it out at a community level. No community level engagement, and that was the start of the horrendous situation we see here today. And I'm sorry, but it was caused by government, because I was working in the first IPAS IP applicant hotel at the time, and I had first-hand, it was near Ballymun, and I had first-hand experience of it. So it was handled so badly with local communities, and that's from the beginning. And from that on, we were never going to come back from that, never. So Leo Varadkar, stay in the US, please.
That's a personal message to you. You know, and I think, you know, it's, you know, and that's one thing that we don't have, you know, that conversation, you know. And that's why I'm really, you know, I know it's challenging to try to put these conversations up together, but, you know, I'm hoping that we can try and get that conversation. And, you know, the videos are up on YouTube, you know, and there are some people, you know, streaming live on YouTube. There's some people on Zoom, you know, streaming in, and then we you know, we get these messages out as well, you know, but that we have that space to have the conversation, to have our voices, to look at the things that people call difficult. I say difficult conversation is somebody took their own life. Difficult conversation is that somebody's got cancer, you know, and, you know, but we do talk about those things. So if we can talk about cancer that is going to kill you now, we know that, you know, and, you know, we can talk about those things and, you know, find solutions, then we should be able to talk about racism. It cannot be something, oh, you know, we're uncomfortable. Cancer makes people uncomfortable, but we talk about it, you know, and so that's so we must normalize, you know, because then we are able to, because denial, I might ask that as a question rather than, you know, so like what happens socially and psychologically and politically when a country says, you know, we are not racist, you know, but white people are still being harmed, you know. Darren?
Okay, I'll go first. I think like denial is a major part of it, like in the rhetoric that's used. Like I'm obviously coming from a political angle, but when you look at, I think because, right, sorry if I'm getting too historical here, but you have a large period where there's massive civil rights movements in the US, in Europe, where people fight for change, where it's like racist systems are fought back against. So it's like the argument is won. So now no one can say they're racist, obviously, but the underlying dynamics that I think cause division keep on going. So it's always, what is it? Tommy Robinson over in Britain is never going to say he's a racist. Trump in America, whoever the far right people are here, there's a part of denial that's necessary to sort of normalize the politics. Same with, like, you have people in France, in Italy, in parties that their roots were in fascist parties, in like in France, people who collaborated with the Nazi regime, who are now making sort of, they put on the nice suit, they speak words that the journalists are allowed to write down, but they still get the point across that it's the Algerians who have come here that have caused the crisis. So denial, I think, plays a fairly central role in how this racist politics is able to make itself out, where the kind of the dog whistles are used, and it's sort of like the people who are at the top pushing this onto people are kind of wearing a mask. None of them are going to say, I support racism or this, that, and the other. But there's always an excuse. There's someone who deserves to get it. It's the unvetted man, or it's the, you know, illegal immigrant. They collect these terms, these ways that you can say what you wanted to say before, but at an appropriate target. Just on, sorry, I didn't want to bring it back there, just about like direct provision and how everything is broken out recently in the last 2-3 years with the massive protests and stuff like that. I mean, when you look at how the government caused these issues in local communities, I mean, there have been problems with the direct provision system for decades that people have been fighting about, that it's like treating the people in these centres as if they're like resources or inanimate objects, moving them around the country, putting them in this hotel, that'll make us, that person's making money, we'll give the centre the money. Well, it's dehumanising. People don't have enough money to live on. People are trapped in these centres, depressed. And I think it's that kind of dehumanisation that allowed the rest of it to happen, because the government treated those people horribly. and put them in old buildings and old office blocks and old hotels as if they weren't worth anything. It makes it very easy for other people to dehumanize them then. And when I think it was intentional, that there's a real lack of intention or a lack of making people who are in the direct provision system and to integrate themselves into society. It's difficult for them to get work. It's difficult for them to afford stuff, even for their kids going to school. Often the hotels are out in the middle of nowhere, so it's hard to get transport.
And now they're supposed to pay housing from it.
Yeah, and now, yeah, exactly. And then, but the government benefits from this because wherever asylum seekers are allowed to be in the local community, if they get a deportation order from the government, local people fight back against it. We had it in DCU twice. I think there were campaigns where there were asylum seekers studying at my university. When they got their deportation orders, the students' union said, no, we're not accepting it, we're fighting back, and got them rescinded. So there's almost an intentional dehumanization because the process needs to keep deporting people and needs to keep getting people out and needs to treat them badly, that it's sort of, that's reflected then in society because there's, you know, an easy scapegoat. But sorry, I got off the question there.
But Dara, can I actually, and I just want to make this clear, because I worked in the system where, and it wasn't a backwater hotel, it was a 4-star hotel. So people are saying, my goodness, look, this amazing hotel, wouldn't I love to stay in a hotel? So I'll tell you exactly how they're treated, and I'll tell you exactly how migrants are treated in these hotels. Basically, the workers themselves, their jobs have been taken away from them. So they've got a totally different job, but guess what? They're also migrants. So they've got a totally different job to do now. So they're not too pleasant to the person that comes in. Secondly, the children in the hotels are not allowed to congregate. There is no communal areas for them to congregate. So when they come in from school, they have to go back up to their rooms and they're told they're not allowed to go to other rooms. Thirdly, the food is the same. So if you've come from a different country and, for instance, you don't eat ham sandwiches, well, hard cheese. And that is the God's honest truth. We had a situation where non-halal meat was served to Muslims and they were told it was halal. So this is the disrespect. So, you know, really this system has to be looked at. And for Irish people to believe it's not a walk in the park for these people. In fact, it's depressing. It's an awful situation to be in. And you know what? The hotels turn off the heating. And I brought that right up to iPass. They turned off the heating in the winter. And the kids coming from Africa, coming from school, wet, cold, no heating. So I just want to clear that up for Irish people to realise these systems are awful for families and for individuals.
Because people make it look like if, you know, you're in a luxury
4-star hotel.
I mean, I promise you that everyone who is living in these hotels, if you offer them the freedom to go and work now and say, you know what, we're not going to give you any money, go and work, fend for yourself. I promise you, every one of them will take it. Every one of them will choose to go and work and fend for themselves, you know, than to sit down in a place where you're told when to go, when to come, you know, and when to eat, when not to eat, and you can't cook for yourself, you can't cook for your kids never see you cooking, you know. And just wanted to pick up one thing, you know, when you use that word influx, I'm like, oh, that's that word I don't like. That's my pet hate, you know, because, and you know, it's the way, you know, just like the unvetted males, you know, and that's how the government says it so much. And after a while, it just becomes how we speak about it, you know, because I say, what is influx? Number one, you know, they're not pests, they're not rodents, you know, they're human beings, you know. So when we talk about human beings, like with influx, we already created an image, you know, it's like an influx of bees. I'm like, ooh, you know. So it's, because this naming, it's about categories and names. Language is so important. It creates an image. And what has happened, because the government used it so much, everybody used it so much, everyone, even ethnic minorities use it. You know, I said, no, don't check that word. And then check the numbers, you know, because when you say influx, I say in 2004, we had, you know, massive number of EU migrants, you know, during the ascension who came into Ireland. That was not called an influx.
Yes.
It was not, it's not, till tomorrow, it's not been described as influx.
Yeah.
Influx is people who came to seek international protection. So that's the people, you know, who are, so there are a particular group of people that are called influx, and so, so just, like, just,
careful.
be careful, like, we pick.
Sorry, Ebun.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
But I
No,
think
no,
it's- I
it's
think
not a
it's-
slap. We're all learning here.
Yeah,
We're all
yeah.
learning here.
But I think as well, with the traveller community as well, and those who are living, I suppose a lot of people we have our own different kind of class system as well within the traveller community, and those we've a lot of traveller children who are living in halting sites, in really poor living circumstances. Where I visited one actually quite recent, about a year ago, and where there was no play area, just concrete, and there was 40 maybe mobile homes, and that was next to a dump, and the gas just be released a couple of times a year out onto that. So that's a fact, and people are aware of that, and that does exist. There's kids there, so even I went there on a warm summer's day, and the order was unreal, and I was saying to myself, how can people actually be expected to live like this? But that is socially acceptable. That is acceptable. So I can't see how that is right.
And that's the challenge that is acceptable. When I was looking at, traveler numbers in education, I'm like, how is this acceptable? How did this happen? Do you understand? Because even before COVID, when I was teaching in Marino, and I used to say, to teacher education, I say, you know what, that if people actually cared about traveler people, we would have created education that suited traveler. Because imagine if Ireland was nomadic, right? If we were moving around, our education system would have been done in such a way that you will start your education in Dublin, you can finish in Galway. Do you understand? What happened in COVID? We got people into universities without sitting exams. How did we do that? We got laptops to them. We trained them from home. Do you understand what I mean? So we met people where they're at.
But you could say the same about disability. So you've got a lot of disabled children that don't attend school. I mean, you must see it in your locations, and Dara, because you're a counsellor. We've a lot of autistic children that are school avoidant because simply the classrooms are not accessible to them. They're told to sit down. They may want to stim. They're not encouraged to stim. They're not encouraged. A lot of the schools now do not. Forget about sensory room, right? Sensory room is a lovely thing to have. We're talking about do not have somewhere where a child can sit down and regulate. And that is the God's honest truth. You've got places in my town in Swords where schools are just full to capacity, and in fact, the play areas are taken up with porta cabins. So we're talking about accessible educational. It's the same across the board for any minority group.
And
unfortunately,
I think the challenge is they are not talking to the people who are involved. Look, our time is spent, but again, we will have an audience in the room. I don't know if there's a contribution or a question for the panel or a contribution. Oh, okay.
One, two.
Yes, we'll get you a mic.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the panelists, when you're talking to someone about racism, and how do you get them past the kind of barrier to denial? Because there is kind of people have kind of a suspended belief when they're thinking about racism. They don't want to admit it, but it's right in front of them. I feel definitely when you're operating from a point of privilege to, in all fields of intersectionality, there is that kind of barrier, bell curve between understanding and not understanding. So how do you get when you're talking to someone, what do you think when you're trying to get them past that kind of barrier of disbelief?
When you're talking to someone about racism, there are three things that you need to look at. You're never going to change other people.
Yeah.
So on the spectrum, so there are ones that are extreme, there are some that are in the middle, and there's some that are just there. So focus on the ones that are there, that are not yet decided. I don't waste my energy to talk about racism with anyone that is already that side. So I just focus my energy on those that are willing to be educated and they've brought themselves into that space of learning. So if someone is already being racist towards me, there's no need for me to be engaging that individual. I just turn away because that affects my own mental health. So I don't focus on that. I only concentrate on the ones that I can see there is hope. And actually, they might not know what they're saying, and they just need to be turned a bit this way so that they can get the guidance and the learning. And it's something that someone has to make a conscious decision, because remember, it's not that they're just being racist to you at that moment. It's a system that has been generational. They grew up, they were socialized, and they saw it happening. And it's a taught behavior as well. They see these things happening in the houses or in the schools, in the education, on TV. So they're bringing all that with them. So you just have to make just a quick assessment. Are they this side, in the middle, or they are somewhere there? And then you can actually engage those people.
And I think context matters as well. Because I suppose when you look at it at an individual level, but in a professional capacity, and it depends what environment you're in, and particularly I work in a higher education institution, I work in the University of Galway, so my role is to lead out to develop and implement and monitor a race quality framework and action plan. 125 actions I have to look after. I don't lead them, I look after them to make sure that we get across the line. And there's lots of conversations around that as well. And for me, what I find as well, that people, and I'm saying professionally and personally, I feel that you have to go back to people's definition of racism as well. Because I do believe that everybody believes that racism, some form of racism exists, and they all have their own, but it excludes people, you know. And for me, my version is quite broad. But I think sometimes in my work, I'm very aware of that. And one thing that I always have to do is, I suppose, you have the education piece and you have all of that, but is one thing that I do to ensure that I'm advancing race equality, I get those actions across the line, is that you have to keep people connected to the why. Why? That is, why we're here, why we're doing this, why we're going to work together to get across the line. But there is a level of respect, there is a level of trust, and there has to be a level of engagement as well, and some kind of opening to an opportunity to learn from each other. So for me as a practitioner, I will be there to meet them, not to educate them on racism. That's up to them. That's up to themselves, and avail of the opportunities that are in the university or wherever for them. But I'm there to work with them, to learn of opportunities, how we can work together as a team to get these actions across the line. So.
Okay, may I take another question or comment? Yes, there's a comment here.
Hello. I have comments basically because I think each one of you, whatever you have said, and these are connected to me and my own life experience of experiencing racism, and my family also as an Indian immigrant. And then I went to Gadi 2-3 times, and they did not record those cases. And before that, first time when it happened to my husband, and we met, we wanted to go to Gadi and complain, but in the taxi we met one Indian guy. He said, no need to go to Gadi because they will not do anything about it. And not only this, he said, it's quite common, what this young people did this to you. You are foreigners. That's why, they are treated you differently. So there is a problem that not only majority, but, the minorities, they are denying racism. And there is no acknowledgement. And as one professor very rightly said, that there is this kind of social contract where the immigrants, minorities, travelers, they have all subscribed to this social contract where they have to live with this inequality. So, you are being pressurized to succumb to live with a state of racism without complaining about it. As you have said, contribution. So even if you are contributing, it doesn't matter. Like, you have been recognized, you have been racialized as different right from the outset. And all of you have rightly pointed out that it's a defense strategy of government any existential crisis in Ireland, they will say it is related to immigrants. So immigrants are being projected, as bad in today's time. There is no good and bad immigrants. There are bad immigrants because there is a housing crisis, and all existential crisis in Ireland is because of the immigrant. Secondly, another problematic thing, which concerns me more, is the kind of this denial of, there is not only denial of racism, there is a denial of race difference.
Different.
Yeah, in policy, in schools, in media, in universities. First of all, Ireland is not recognizing race, ethnic differences right from the very beginning. This is very problematic. As a result of which, what happened, because there is a denial, now minorities are blaming each other. So the Indian immigrant, they are made to believe that travelers are the problem. I mean, their kids are the ones who are creating, this kind of problem. I understand, they are being marginalized, but I understand their history. I understand about their lives. But many immigrants are not aware about them. Their life trajectory. They are not aware about it. There is a lot of myth about the community. And therefore, any step towards racial equality, it will have to start with education. Creating an awareness that there is a lot of myth. Racism do exist in Ireland. And travelers and mixed races, they have certain history. And I think as an immigrant, our kids, they must know about their history. That realization has to be there to debunk the myth and to accept that there are differences. I think any conversation, so I'm thankful that, you are having this kind of conversation.
Thank you so much. Again, we must demystify, we must talk about it, we must create those spaces. I think we have 2 more there. We can keep it as brief as possible so we take everybody.
My name is Kensika.
Hi, Kensika.
Okay. What I want to say today is I'm sad, okay? Because as Ruben was saying, I came here in 1998 in Ireland, right? 1998. Anytime I walk on a common street, I saw another black person, I would wave. Yeah, because we were having those conversations. Yes, and I was hoping that as we move on, kids who are now supposed to be 26, who are growing up here now with experiencing diversity, they'll say, oh, it's just normal to have a friend who's black, who's, yellow, who's whatever, But what I'm seeing now is actually worse than when I came. Yeah. It's very scary. As a parent, I'm thinking, I don't know if I will encourage my children to stay in Ireland, and are born and raised here. This is the conversation I'm having now with my children. Understand? So I don't know, we're talking, that conversation now is deja vu. I've seen that before. We've been there, done that. If you Google Kensika Mosheng, you'll see National Action Plan Against Racism. That's the second one. The first one, I was involved with the National Council of Community on Racism and Interculturalism, and we were there. I mean, been there, done that. And we're still having the same conversation. As I'm sure, I know Dara, I was convincing Dara at one stage when I ran for the Senate. Not because I wanted to get it, I just wanted to show my children that, you live here, I'm running. One day just before the closure, I got nominated just to put my face in there to show people that we're here.
It's possible.
But I knew I wasn't going to get it, okay? But what I'm saying is that I'm saddened when I'm listening to what I'm listening to now, okay? So I don't know what you're going to do. I know we've been complaining, but maybe we have to look for some other solutions. I'm sad to hear what you said, but I know that the legislation is there. On paper, everything is good, but sometimes you need to try and use it, okay? The Equal Status Act is there, Employment Equality Act. I know friends who have used those pieces of legislation who have won cases. So the legislation is there, do it, okay? Use it, it works. And I have a lot of examples to show that. So just to say that we've been complaining, yes. We have to find some solutions, yes. What? I have no idea. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much,
Evan,
Jessica.
can I just say something? I think it's a lot to do with representation as well. I think if you can't see it, you won't be it. And I think if you look in Leinster House, how many brown or black faces do you see? I think we need better representation throughout all the government buildings.
Can I just go back to the reporting piece there? So I'd like to say it loud and clear. Anybody who has experienced racism, you need to report it.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
need to formally report it,
Yes.
or you can informally report it too. So formally, you go to the Garda Síochána, and I've learned the best way to do it is through the 999 actually, because there's a record automatically developed and it's stored. But also you have the iReport that you can report to as well. And I know in higher education we have Speak Out, and we use it. And I know that that's been under. There's a lot of underreporting going on there as well. And I suppose I'm involved in that we'll be running a sectoral campaign. We'll be leading out in that in the coming months. So we see that that's going up. But what you just mentioned there, I suppose. We have established a race equality team at the University of Galway. We're the only higher education institution to do that. So it's myself, and I also have 4 other posts across the colleges who work with staff and students who do experience that. And a lot of what's coming through is actually external. It's external, access in public services. Being on a bus, something happens, trying to get accommodation. Those are the experiences. And even during the summer, we were very aware of instances that was happening to the Indian community and how we could work to support that. Now, I suppose we're fortunate in that regard that we can offer those wraparound supports, and not everybody can have that. So we're conscious of that as well. But going back to the reporting, I honestly do believe you need to report it. You need to report it.
And I think it also comes from the fact that people who have had bad experiences reporting, but it should not be an excuse, because if we don't have the data in there, then the system will say there is no problem. So it's just something. We'll take one more, and I think there's some comments on Zoom as well. We'll take that comment.
So I'm Amanda. I'm a student journalist from DCU.
Can hear you.
Yeah, I'm from DCU, like Dara. My question is, so what do you believe that Irish media can do to help change the negative language that's being spewed about migrants and ethnic minorities, like the likes of News Talk, the Indo, because I'm a journalist, I can see that it's very much whitewashed. We only talk about things that gender-based violence that was talked about in an Irish sense and not a South African sense, and the fact that we're not portrayed in the best light. So what do you think the Irish media can do to change that?
Wants to go?
I'm going to say a few things about this. I have a few thoughts about
Do
it.
they want to hear it?
But they're going to hear it if they want. So I suppose one thing for me, because I work in a higher education institution, I want to see a more global kind of perspective in the curricula and how we're developing that. It's not there yet. People have their own version of globalization, and for me, if that's absent without global South perspectives, and ethnic minorities and so on and so forth, there's a problem. So that's one thing. Representation does matter. I don't believe that there's enough journalists out there or enough opportunities for people from ethnic minority backgrounds to be able to progress into media and be able to be successful. So the government needs to look at that. There's various different models that can be used, pilot programs, trainee programs, intern programs, whatever you want. It can be done. But also as well, that the media needs to be brave. The media sector needs to be braver and open up spaces where we can have discussions, like I talk about race equality. Some people meet me about race equality. Oh God, here he is. He's just going to talk about racism all day long. But there's so much positive aspects to it. So for me, what I love, I suppose we all in these roles, you do have to have your space where you can kind of regenerate and move forward. And for me, that's the curriculum space. I love the thought of Ebun would know that I'm very involved. We established a Travellers Archive in the university. I'm very involved with student engagement and also with the Department of History. And we're in the middle now at the moment of we're developing we're co-creating a Black History Archive with our university community.
But that's what happens when you put somebody who is your lived experience.
Yes.
The work you're doing is not just a job. Do you understand?
Yeah, but I'm in an environment where I'm empowered to do this.
Yes.
That's what matters, And I myself came through an access program. I was I'm not going to go down my own history, but what I'm saying, I've lived it, so I can see it the other side. So for me, that is really important. But then again, it goes back to leadership. Leadership and buy-in as well.
Okay. Did we have one, because we have to finish? Did we have?
Yeah, we had one comment online. So
okay.
it says from Osa Godwin, while we often place the responsibility for integration on the government, does the panel not think that immigrants also have a duty to actively seek out routes, policies, or processes that will help them to integrate faster?
I'll answer that one. No. No, it doesn't. It's down to government. We pay our taxes. Migrants pay their taxes. Eventually, I don't think it's been said enough. We are relying on a workforce coming into this country, and you will not hear the politicians saying it. We have in the HSE alone. There's so many vacant positions. There's so many vacant positions in hospitality. There's so many vacant positions all over Ireland, and the politicians just aren't brave enough to say we need IP applicants. We need them to be able to work. We need to give them their visas after 6 months. If that's, they should be allowed to work. People should be allowed to work straight away. But we need these people, but politicians won't come out and say that.
Could I say, sorry, a couple of things, because there's quite a few things people said there that I think are kind of linked together. Just starting maybe on the Gardaí refusing to record racism. The amount of times I've heard that repeated over and over and over again. Like, there was one person I knew who got a death threat, and the Gardaí waited there going, oh no, you don't want to report this. Oh no, it's your neighbour. You don't want to cause an issue. This might cause things down the line for 30 minutes until they go, okay, I guess I won't report it then. There's like a systemic issue then there. And also maybe a problem with the fact that a lot of the people who investigate these sort of issues on behalf of GSOC are also former Gardaí. So there's a cultural element there that needs to be addressed. I had a problem when the government was initially going to bring in kind of new hate crime legislation, which then they didn't, and then they were. And some of it was to expand Garda powers to deal with hate crime. And they're not using the powers they have right now to deal with them. So I'd say report it and be belligerent and annoying until they're red in the face, and make sure it's recorded there. And if they don't, go to the Irish Network Against Racism, go to any organisation, But I think just in the kind of larger scale, right? Because that might win one individual's case. However, they will have 100 more people who aren't confident in their rights in this country that might be abused by the system there. When that man was attacked in Tala, the Indian man, it was horrific. And I know this is one unique case, but with Dublin South West Together, United Against Racism, which I'm a member of, we called together a protest because we were disgusted and we wanted the community to come out and see. Hundreds of people turned up, and the Gardaí are definitely investigating that. Now, I'm not saying you can call a protest every time someone gets attacked, but we have a responsibility to create an environment where the Gardaí will be afraid of not reporting on something because we might come out. So, because on that point, because people are asking questions about how you have these hard conversations, how do we deal with this, how we've been talking about this for 20 years now. People who came to this country, you came to this country the year I was born. You're experiencing the same things that I'm experiencing now. I was over in London for a festival. Sorry, that was maybe making you feel old. That sounded better in my head.
It just makes us feel a little more sad.
But I was over and I got this book. I need to finish it, about the Anti-Nazi League, right? Where conditions, they were far worse than they are now and getting worse. There were fascists actually marching on the street. They were going. Someone told me stories about what it was like living in London as a black child there, and it was horrific. And they had, and I'm going to throw this word out, it's kind of jargon or whatever, but they formed a united front where we have every single person who's opposed to racist violence. We're going to mobilise. They did they even did gigs, like cultural stuff and stuff like that. But I guess the aim that I'm trying to get behind here, and people mentioned it there, Ireland relies on its migrant workforce. The hospitals wouldn't run, our schools wouldn't run, all of our local shops, our public transport wouldn't run. I think there's a question if you're in a workplace that has a union. demand what is my union doing about it. Nurses have a union. I think we have power in our workplaces en masse in our communities that kind of needs to be unleashed to start rolling this stuff back. Because, like, for instance, you've brought up media and how do we get better? Because News Talk drives me insane, because if I get a call from News Talk to ask to do something, I'm like, this is going to be they've found some racist and they've found me and they're going to put me on to debate each other or whatever. Sorry, not sorry, News Talk or whatever. But like, that's it. Like, they get clicks out of the drama and out of spreading this information. The pressure, because there is answers, there is that they need to have more representation, that they need to be more concerned, but the way that you make them is not, I keep using the word make them afraid, or it sounds a bit, someone's going to clip that and then put it somewhere.
Yeah, don't mind.
But I think there needs to be, the way you put pressure to make change is en masse, in mass groups of people. I know that's like easy to say, harder to do, but if the media feels like, because we need them to be brave, we have to make them brave, because they have to be afraid of the alternative of platforming racist ideas, of hitting down on minorities because it gets them clicks. That's where kind of mass movement comes from. I think it's why we have to join up, regardless of our political differences, as long as one of them isn't racism and discrimination. We have unity, we need unity of action on fighting kind of, and sorry, I went on for a bit there, but
So
that's broadly the answer.
Okay, so again, so just, at the end of the day, so there's just so much we can do. Again, that's why we need platforms like this, where we can actually have our say, because sometimes I get on the media, you say something and what gets put out is so different from what you said, and then you come there prepared to say this and they ask you a question that is just so off and it throws you off what you were going to say. So, so again, so I just thought, look, we need that space to do, So just as we end, I always like to end up, on a quick, a happy note. So one sentence each. If Ireland were to let go of the myth that there's no racism in Ireland, what could possibly become? What could become possible?
I think racialized communities will thrive.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think our workforce will be more vibrant, and I also think our political system will be overturned, and for the better.
I think we'd have a stronger, more inclusive Irish identity and society.
I think we could probably start pointing the finger at the people who are actually scamming the system, which is the politicians.
Very good.
So look, it's the final episode for this season, and we've had 6. It was a dream, and I'm so excited, and I really want to say a big thank you to everyone who made this possible, everyone who supported, everyone who was on the panels with me, everyone who said yes when I invited them, brave people having brave conversations. I'm really excited. My audience, thank you all so much. Those online, those listening, sharing it with your students. Please, there's a lot of good material that is out there, and what it will take you to get one of these, people to come speak for you, but you have that material now, so use it for your students. It's a learning space, that we need to unlearn some things. We need to know a bit more. So really, it's really important for note that denial doesn't protect us, It's really important that, denying, that there's race, it doesn't protect us. So even when we do that, it limits us rather than that, And when we say there's no racism in Ireland, we silence real experiences. I say that people have what we call a shut-up experience, when you say there's no, it's a shut-up experience, I was giving a talk a few days back, there was a, yeah. So you almost feel like, shut up, just have, I've grown a thick skin. Oh my God, that is so gonna get trolled, but look, it's fine. So real histories, real opportunities, for change, we silence them. Because when we say there is no racism, what we do is that we push back, we silence the opportunities for change. You cannot change something you cannot accept. When we cannot say, the first, okay, it's not like AA, but AA, the first thing you have to own up, is that you think there's a problem. So if we cannot say there's a problem, we're not going to be able to fix. So tonight has really showed us that, Ireland is at its strongest when we choose honesty over defensiveness, when we name over hiding, when we name things over hiding it, and responsibility over avoidance. So really important. So to our panelists, thank you for your courage, for your clarity. To our audience, thank you for engaging with openness and intention. Thank you, Ruben. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Owen. Thank you, Dara. You know, so this has been the Deep Table. So thank you. And just, you know, so in case you want to help us to be online next season, we're starting back in January, another 6 weeks in January. So, you know, it's a Deep Table. Thank you. And good night.